Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Faster Way podcast. I am so thrilled to be here with Dr. Tom Walters, who is a board certified orthopedic physical therapist. Dr. Tom, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me on, Amanda. This is awesome.
Okay, so a little fun fact that most people in my community do not know about me is that I was a physical therapy assistant in Ohio for a brief time. Okay, it was a very short time. Initially, I worked behind the desk, but then I had the opportunity to kind of put people on traction. We had half of the office was physical therapy, the other half was a gym. And I just learned so much, and funniest part about it is at the time, I happened to have a broken foot, and if you have a broken foot, the best place you could work is at a physical therapy clinic. I would hook myself up to different machines while I was working.
Put yourself on the ice and heat, get some electrical
Yes.
stimulation.
Exactly. Yeah, it was like high volt galvanic something, I'm like, "Man, what are the chances that when I broke my foot was this season I mean, it was just great. So let's hear a little bit about when and why you entered into your field.
Yeah, probably like you. I was an athlete when I was younger. I was a gymnast and martial artist in high school. So I had knee surgery in high school. A lot of physical therapists have a similar journey to this. It's like you get injured, you have surgery, and you end up going to physical therapy. And so I was a total like exercise science. I didn't know those words back then in high school, but I was just totally into exercise. I read like Men's Fitness and Muscle and Fitness. I like geeked out reading that stuff, and like every teenage boy, I was just trying to figure out how to get bigger muscles. So, um, physical therapy was the first time I realized you could use exercise to rehabilitate the body. And so I kind of went from just only thinking about it for performance to then thinking about rehab. And when I went to college, I ended up studying exercise science and kinesiology, and physical therapy just ended up being a really natural. I was really into kind of the mechanics of the body and again how you could use exercise to not only improve performance but also prevent injuries, rehabilitate things if you had pain or an injury. So it just ended up being the right career choice for me.
Yeah, and how many years were you in school to be able to do what you do now?
Physical therapy is you have to have a 4-year degree, like a bachelor's degree, right? And then it's a 3-year doctorate of physical therapy. So it's not as bad as medical school. I thought it was kind of a sweet spot because basically, if you go straight through, you get out when you're about 25. So it's like you aren't wasting too much your 20s in school, but you still have a degree that sounds you get a doctorate. So yeah, about
Yeah.
7 years.
Okay, I love it. I always have my hat off to people who were able to go to school for that long because I barely made it through my first semester freshman year. I was actually an exercise sports science major for a very long day. And then I was like, you know what? No, I'm already a trainer. Like I already know so much of this. So I ended up doing psychology so that I could work full time and still get the credits to kind of check box that degree. But anyway, I'm just so respectful of what you do. And before we get too far into the conversation, I do want to just show the listeners who are on YouTube this massive book that you sent me that is literally bigger and heavier than any college textbook I had to buy. Yeah, literally. It is Rehab Science: How to Overcome Pain and Heal from Injury, and it's so comprehensive. One of my staff team members here saw it when it came in and immediately started geeking out and getting so excited about it, and I pulled up your Instagram. You've got over 1,000,000 followers, and so many people say, "This book has transformed our lives." Let's talk a little bit about some of the most common injuries that people are overcoming with your book. So what kind of in the pre-interview chat, you mentioned, I said, what are the three things people thank you for the most? And you said, helping with plantar fasciitis, helping with XYZ. Let's just dive into that discussion right now.
Yeah, no, as an orthopedic physical therapist, that's really what I do is help people with the most common pains and injuries, all the things we're going to get in life. Most of us are going to have some pain or some injury, whether you're active or sedentary. Something's going to bother you at some point. That's just the nature of the musculoskeletal system. So, and that's really what all my content focuses on Instagram and YouTube is just teaching people really exercises to get out of pain, reduce the risk of injury, and help you recover from injury if you have one. But it's things like plantar fasciitis, Achilles tendon pain, rotator cuff issues, tennis and golfer's elbow, low back pain, sciatica. Like those would all be in kind of the wheelhouse of an orthopedic physical therapist. So again, it's like it's all the stuff most people listening to this are probably like, oh yeah, I've had one of those before.
Yeah, 100%. Let's talk about plantar fasciitis. Am I saying that properly, by the way? Okay. I personally struggled with that quite a bit in college, which was shortly before I broke my fifth metatarsal. It's like you almost wonder if there was some connection there, but I now wear the most ridiculous shoes you've ever seen on a female, specifically a female in her late 30s. And my friends are like, you cannot come out with us if you're wearing those Kenko shoes or if you're wearing those XYZ. But I'm like, for me, it's more important that I'm wearing a healthy shoe, but talk a little bit about what someone client of mine specifically in the faster way can do if she or he is struggling from plantar fasciitis, and define it also for people who might not be familiar.
Yeah, plantar fasciitis is basically an irritation. The name has actually changed to plantar fasciopathy. A lot of these things, itis means inflammation, and it doesn't actually have a true inflammatory process. So they've changed the name, but it's basically pain on the in the arch of your foot, in the plantar fascia. Your plantar fascia is this really thick, dense connective tissue that basically goes from the front of your heel up to the balls of your toes, and it helps to store energy and to help maintain the arches of your foot. But sometimes it can get irritated. It's kind of almost like a tendonitis. It's that kind of tissue. So it would tend to bother people, especially people who are putting stress on their feet repetitively in high volume. So you see it a lot in runners. Like
Mhm.
runners get plantar fasciitis a lot. If people are carrying around extra weight, like if they're a little bit overweight, you're more prone to getting it. And unfortunately, females are more prone to it too. But a lot of people have actually the misunderstanding that it's associated with having a flat foot, a pronated foot, but they've actually shown that it's not more common. Your arch type, like if you have a high arch or a low arch, that doesn't really have too much of a correlation with whether or not you get plantar fasciitis. But basically, if you had that, some of the exercises that really help are calf stretching. So your calf
Mm.
muscles, they come down the back of your leg, hook to your Achilles tendon, and then there's fascia that goes from your Achilles tendon down to your plantar fascia. And so stretching the calf muscles often really helps people. Foam rolling, like some people know about foam rolling their muscles and kind of like a self massage almost. Doing that to your calf muscles can be really helpful. A lot of times, a lot of people take like a massage ball, even just a tennis ball or a lacrosse ball, and massage the bottom of their foot. So you've got your plantar fascia, but then you actually have 5 layers of muscles in the arch of your foot. People don't know how many muscles are down there. I mean,
Wow.
I've gone through and dissected the foot. You get to in physical therapy school, a cadaver comes in, and you dissect a human foot, and there's all these layers of muscles down there. And so you can kind of massage those and loosen them up. And then the newer research actually on plantar fasciitis is looking at stretching the plantar fascia and loading it through really specific strength training, which is basically a calf raise, but you
Mm.
do it with your big toe elevated. So your big toe is kind of up on a pad, and then you do a calf raise, and that helps to put more of the stress on the plantar fascia, which helps make it stronger, which then can help reduce pain and means you're less likely to get it again in the future.
Interesting. Okay, if you've dealt with plantar fasciitis, you have to use the chat feature and let us know on Instagram and YouTube because, oh my goodness, it really impacted me as a runner in college. So, absolutely correct. And I do have a higher arch. So, my husband has very flat feet. He's never been injured in his entire life, although he was an athlete for his whole life through college. And then I'm over here just like doing a little jog and, dealing with all kinds of. Yeah. So, I was aware of the link between the calf muscle and that plantar fascia and, really worked to kind of stretch out the calves, but so interesting about doing a toe elevated calf raise with weight to actually strengthen those muscles, and I didn't realize there were 5 muscles in the foot. That's very, very
Five
interesting.
layers. There's a
5
ton of muscle, 5 layers. So yeah, I can't remember the
layers.
exact number of muscles, but it's probably in the 20s. It's a huge number of muscles down there.
5 layers of muscle. Okay, so interesting, and again, you might have heard me say I wear these crazy shoes, so I wear have you heard of Kenko shoes?
It sounds familiar, but I don't know if I know those.
It's Kenkoh, and I do live in Florida, where a lot of older people also live, and so there's a lot of, like, older people shoe stores.
Are they like a Hoka, like a really supportive?
Well, it's a sandal. So it's actually a sandal that I wear all through my house. It hurts at first when you first get them, so you only wear it, like, for probably 5 minutes a day in the beginning, and then you kinda keep working up, but I have some at my house in Costa Rica, at my house in Florida, it's, like, my main beach shoe as well. There's multiple different styles, but they all look like elderly people's shoes, but I've bought them for everyone I know, my parents, my in-laws, my brother-in-law, like, everybody, because it transformed my foot so much, from the different issues that I was dealing with, but I love your tip to do the toe elevated calf raise. I'm gonna absolutely try that because it sounds like that's part of the strengthening and then prevention as well.
Totally. And shoe type is a huge part of this. That's you have to people have to kind of experiment. You were talking about, it was the right shoe for you. That is a huge part of plantar fasciitis is that sometimes people think they have to get a shoe that matches their arch. Like, oh, I've got a low arch, I need this shoe. If I have a high arch, I need this shoe. And really what it boils down to is finding the shoe that is most comfortable. That's what the research basically shows now with shoe wearers. Find the one that you're most comfortable in. That's kind of a similar thing with like your pillow at night and your mattress. Like you have to kind of experiment with different shoes until you find the thing that kind of fits your body best.
Yeah.
Was that the case with yours that it was comfortable, or was it that it probably wasn't comfortable at first if you had to gradually work into it? Did it strengthen your foot? What's the intention of it?
So it's allegedly like the healthiest shoe. It has, you know how the like old school Adidas would have the little almost like massaging, I don't even know what to call them, but it was like old school Adidas sandals when you'd like play soccer and then you'd take your soccer cleats off and you put on the and they had the little kind of nodules. It's similar, but it has it in an interesting shape on the shoe. And so in my case, it did support my arch a bit more, but yet there was a component of which my foot did need to get stronger over time to even be able to wear it comfortably. So I'm like, you would be able to look at it and tell me more about why it works, and I'm able to. But I like, though, the fact that you're saying every person is different, every body is different. I remember being in college, and one of my friends was a really talented high school runner and then got to college, and the cross country track coach for distance said, "You have to wear XYZ insoles," and it ruined her running. It actually, like, it somehow like, she was like, "Well, what I was doing before was working, and I was fast, and now I'm injured." So I'm not sure
Yeah,
it's
you really
not
can't mess with people. It's just that one size fits all approach is so outdated, and you can't look at people's bodies like that anymore, especially when it comes to pain and injury. You have to. I totally, yeah, agree. If she had a formula that was working, you don't mess with things like that, especially in athletes. We're so much more apprehensive now to mess with athletes because even when you think you're helping them and making their body more, fit in line with kind of the normal textbook like range of motion and strength and things, a lot of times it messes them up and their performance goes down.
Exactly, exactly. Let's talk about the Achilles, the Achilles, Achilles, the Achilles, because I literally 3 days ago was having a conversation with one of our tippity top certified coaches here at the Faster Way, and she said, "Amanda, 3 out of 4 of my friends in the past year have torn their Achilles." One was doing a pickup game of basketball, one was just at their kid's soccer game and, like, jumped to just, like, cheer. And then another one, I forget what it but it was all just, like, not things you would one was pickleball. So it was pickleball, which let's talk about so it was pickleball, it was jumping to cheer at the kids' game, and then the 3rd one was, pick yeah, so why are people in their 30s tearing their Achilles so often, 30s, 40s? Like, what is going on?
It's such a common thing at that age range because people tend to be more sedentary during the week. We talk about like the weekend warrior kind of idea where people have jobs, they just once you get out of college and you get a little older and you're working, you're naturally a little more sedentary. People often put on a little bit of weight, and then on the weekends they still imagine themselves being 18 and jumping and just go playing basketball and doing whatever. And so it really kind of boils down to a loss of strength and strength in the Achilles tendon. And your tendons are like springs, so they store and release energy. And if you don't train them to do that, then they lose that capacity. And then when you go try to jump, you're asking them to act like a spring, and they just pop. So the Achilles tendon is the strongest tendon in the body. So people are always like, well, why does it rupture? But you have to imagine the amount of force you're putting through that tendon to lift your whole body weight off the ground. And um, pickleball and pickup games at basketball are really common for this because what happens is people will reach back with their leg to kind of push off. They're kind of reaching back. So that puts your ankle in dorsiflexion, which you imagine is the opposite of pointing your foot. It's kind of pulling your toes up towards your nose. So that stretches your Achilles tendon. So it's being stretched, and then you're pushing off the ground forcefully. So not only are you stretching it and lengthening it maximally, you're then asking it to create a bunch of force, and it just rips off the bone. So the way to prevent things like that, it sounds, I know, and what's crazy is people don't actually have a lot of pain usually when it happens. They think that someone hit them. They'll feel like they heard a loud sound
Yep.
and think that like a people will say like I heard this loud sound. I thought somebody hit me on the back of the leg or something, and it was actually it tearing. The way to prevent things like that is to continue strengthening your tendon with just basic things like calf raises. Like most people don't know that you should be able to do 25 clean single leg calf raises. And that tends to go down over age. If you look at 80-year-olds, they can usually not even do 10. So, but you can maintain that. If you just keep working on calf raises, it's such a boring exercise, but it matters so much and it'll help with the plantar fasciitis. It'll help you not have Achilles tendonitis. It'll help prevent Achilles tendon ruptures. And then other things like jump roping, like just keep jumping. Like we stop jumping as we get older, like people just naturally do. And so if you just practice something like jump roping or you're in fitness classes where there's kind of like you're jumping like that. You could even just jump in place. Like we call them pogo jumps. You just jump on one leg or you jump on two legs if you haven't done this in a long time. And you just add that to your training program. It really does help improve the spring capacity of your Achilles tendon. You're much less likely to rupture it.
Okay, I am texting my 2 top trainers as we speak and saying we need to do more calf raises in our leg days. We this past weekend did a heavy leg day with calf raises, but it's few and far between on our total body strength days. So I'm definitely gonna add more calf raises. I was shuddering if you're watching on YouTube. I was literally shuddering, not just because of the injury itself, more so because I know the recovery time. If you tear your Achilles, it's extremely disruptive, okay? Extremely disruptive. This is one of the major things. It's like, we'll talk about shoulders, we'll talk about knees. The Achilles is horrendous. When you get that surgery, what would you say to it's like a 6-month recovery. Wouldn't you say so, Tom?
Oh, for sure. Even longer. I mean, if you're really looking at getting full strength back and back to sports, you're probably looking at closer to a year. I mean, it's one you'd never wish on anyone. That and ACLs, they both take so long.
Yep, yep, absolutely. So, more calf raises. This is great because it's gonna help me with my plantar fasciitis. Even when I'm sprinting against my 13-year-old on the beach, I'm faster than her still. That's gotta get that on record. I am faster than her still, but very quickly, 3, 4 sprints in, I'm feeling it on my plantar fasciitis, and I'm like, "Okay, I gotta pull back because 'cause we're usually barefoot, and she could go all day. And so I am faster than her, but let's be clear, it's like, I'm kinda having aches and pains, and 13-year-olds, they don't feel nothing. Like, and she's not even sore the next day, you know?
Their ability to recover, that's the thing I think as you get older, that's what I noticed. I can still do a lot of stuff I could do when I was in my, teens and 20s, but I just don't recover. And,
Yeah.
tweak things way easier. So you definitely have to be more cognizant of that as you get older, is just being smart about like warm-ups
Yep.
and the volume. Like sprints are great, but if you have to know your body and be aware of it and like, okay, if I that last sprint I felt a little tired, my body like that's your stopping point. If you push
Yep.
another one, that's when people strain things and injure things.
Exactly.
So
Yeah, yeah, I usually go 60%, I do a proper warm up and then I go 60%, 70%, 80%. The 4th time I'm gonna go 100%, but usually I don't get much past that without being like, "Okay, I'm feeling it in my feet, I'm feeling it in" sometimes, my piriformis will kinda start to get a little bit sore. Ooh, okay,
the joys of
let's
getting older.
yeah. But you know what? It is what it is. Like, I don't know how old you are. I am just committed that, like, that can't be part of my narrative because I wanna live to 105. So I'm gonna start reverse engineering now of what needs to be true to thrive until 105, and part of it is I need strength, so protein, putting on muscle, maintaining that muscle, but then B, it's this mobility, and it's the functional movement capabilities, and it's the prevention of injury. Um, Okay, let's talk about, like, the Rice Krispie moment. So, like, I don't know if you okay, so when I just put my hands above my And I just kinda snap, crackle, pop a little bit on the shoulders and the back and the neck, and I had a major, major zip line incident in January where I got very severe whiplash because my hair got stuck in the contraptions, very serious, so I was hanging there for 10 minutes. So, that was a very, extreme situation, but is it normal to kind of hear some of that snap, crackle, pop, or is it something we should be concerned about?
Yeah, it's totally normal. Your musculoskeletal system makes noise all the time, and everybody varies in this. If I could put my knee up to the microphone, ever since I've been 13, my knees, every time I squat down, they pop like crazy. They're just loud, and people are always disturbed by it. They're like, "Oh, I think something's wrong with you." And it's interesting. We actually have research studies showing that people whose bodies make more noise than other people, they're often embarrassed by it in
Yeah.
social situations, and they feel like something's wrong with them. And so we're always trying to put out the message that actually, when we look at the research, it's normal for the body to make noise. And in a lot of cases, noises that come from joints are actually an indication that the joint is well lubricated. So
Hmm.
yeah, but in your musculoskeletal system, all different things can make noises. Like your joints will sometimes kind of pop. Like if you think about going to a physical therapist or a chiropractor and they manipulate you and make your
Yes.
joint pop, you're essentially that can happen just when you're moving around. Like if you squat down, your knees pop, or whatever, you turn your head and your neck pops. Like you're
Mhm.
just creating pressure changes in your joints. They're called cavitations, but there are other sounds, we'll call it crepitus sometimes, where things just kind of rub. People get those Rice Krispies. Sometimes tendons will kind of snap over bony prominences, like little parts of your bones, and it'll make this little thud that you can't hear, but it feels like you can hear it. And people are
Yes.
like, oh, feel this. Can you feel this little, and a lot of times it's just tendons shifting around. So unless it causes pain, we try to tell people, like, don't stress about it. It's
Okay.
it's a mechanical your body is a mechanical system, and there's going to be mechanical forces where things kind of rub and pop, and unless it hurts, don't worry about it.
Okay, okay, that's good to hear. Yeah, I tend to, like, shock people sometimes. I'll just, like, put my arm up to, like, grab something, and it's like, "Pop," and people my team here is always, like, shocked and jarred, and coaches and my wrist, I played volleyball, it's just but that's helpful to know, and now that I think about it, my dad, it's like, I could always hear when my dad woke up in the morning because his joints would pop, and
Yep,
it's
I
like
think
I
there's
could
a
hear him walking up the
totally.
stairs.
I think there's a genetic thing to it because my 13-year-old daughter has the same knee popping thing I do. And I think it's probably partly because, again, it is a mechanical system and the way that your bones form and your joints form. I think some people they're more prone to having joints that make noises. And she has the exact same thing I have. And it started about the same age. So it's interesting.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so in the faster way to fat loss, we strength train. We do 2 days of high intensity interval training, but no more than 45 minutes total a week. We strength train 3 days a week, total body strength, upper body strength, and then leg day, which is our heaviest lift of the week. And then we do 2 Pilates, yoga, or active recovery days, like an ISO stretch, which we created here at the Fast Way. What is the most common mistake you see women and men making as they begin a strength training journey?
Yeah, I love first off that you're just incorporating strength training. Resistance training is the number one thing I talk about in physical therapy. There's just so much evidence for it. And what you were talking before about getting enough protein, because I do think there's so much, like, there's normal things that happen with aging, but you can offset so much of that with especially resistance training
Mm.
and maintain, like, the whole goal of it is maintaining functional independence as long as you can. And resistance training, mobility training, those things really have the best evidence in terms of kind of helping you stay healthy, mobile, strong for your whole lifetime. So I love that you're talking about strength training and resistance training. I think the mistake that most people make when they're new is I think that they probably load their system too heavily too fast. That's what I'll
Mm.
often see if somebody, resistance training is a skill set, and especially if you go to, like, if you think about machines are more stable.
Yeah.
And often, if you're in a gym, they're a good place to start if you're new to strength training because you don't have to control as much. Where I see a lot of people get injured is they jump right to free weights when they don't have much of a strength training background. And your neuromuscular system really has to learn how to control dumbbells and barbells and things like that. And if you start light, it's not that big a deal, but I can't tell you how many people I've seen that have injured their rotator cuff because they go and start dumbbell bench pressing or incline bench pressing with dumbbells and they pick up the 50-pound dumbbells and they might be I've seen people who are actually quite strong, but they just don't have the neuromuscular control yet, and they injure something. Or I've seen people lose control of something and dislocate their shoulder. And so those are more extreme examples. But I think what often happens is that people just go too hard too fast, and maybe they get injured, or maybe they're just so sore that then they can't train
Mm.
again on the next training day. So I think, in strength training, we talk all about progressive overload. Like
Yep.
you want it to be a gradual, progressive adding of weight and challenge. And so just, don't let your ego get in the way and increase the weight too quickly. I think that's maybe one of the best things to think about when you start.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And if you are listening and you're a newer, faster way client, I encourage you to check out our foundations workouts, which are really wonderful to learn proper form. Proper form is absolutely key. And for me, a pain point moving from in-person training to now online virtual training is I have just a little bit less control over my client's form. When I was in the gym belly to belly with a client, I would show them, I would watch them, I would even like ask for permission to touch different areas where I wanted them to really isolate the flex. So definitely consider if you're new and you're listening to this podcast, look at those foundations workouts. We slow it down, we cue you more, and then dive into the standard or advanced workouts. But I totally agree with you. Nautilus equipment has more, has less variables. So it's just, safer in some ways. I prefer free weights for sure. But I think that's really, really great. Let's talk about the rotator cuff though, because shoulder injuries are extremely common. And then you got frozen shoulder and you got hormonal issues and blah, blah, blah. So, what's a good way to prevent a rotator cuff injury?
Yeah, a lot of it with rotator cuff injuries is like a lot of other tissues in the body is regularly incorporating strengthening exercises for your rotator cuff, right?
Hmm.
Like I feel like this is all I talk about all the time is, mobility exercises are of course really important, but a lot of people have the mobility they need for life. So
Hmm.
we run into less issues with mobility unless somebody's had an injury and they've lost mobility or something like that. But most people, it's actually like just they don't have strengthening exercises that target these tissues. And your rotator cuff will work with a lot of exercises. Like if you do push-ups or rows, some of these bigger, like I'm sure a lot of the exercises you have in your programs, those will activate your rotator cuff muscles. But sometimes you want to have really specific exercises for the different movements of your shoulder. Like your shoulder moves in all three planes of motion. It moves through flexion, extension, goes through internal and external rotation, abduction, adduction, all these movements. And most people aren't adding exercises for all those movements. So for the rotator cuff, a lot of it is like people have probably seen some of these exercises, but imagine somebody standing with a band and their elbows at their
Mm.
side and they're kind of turning their arm out. So that exercise, it's called resisted external rotation. You can also do it lying on your side. If you have your arm on top and hold a dumbbell, you can do side lying external rotation. But just adding exercises like that really specifically challenge your rotator cuff muscles and their tendons. Well, you just think about it. Your muscles and tendons are mechanical units. If you make them stronger, they're less likely to tear. Like
Mm.
I think people logically can see how that goes together.
Yeah.
When you strengthen muscles, they hypertrophy. The same with tendons, they hypertrophy and thicken. So if those tissues get stronger, they hypertrophy, they get thicker, they're not going to tear as easily. So I mean, honestly, that's probably the biggest part. There's sometimes you can't 100% prevent injuries. Like if your dog pulls you down and you land on your arm, well, yeah, you might tear your rotator cuff or something. Like there's no amount of string training that prevents everything 100% of the time. Sometimes accidents, the whiplash thing with your neck. Like you could have been strengthening your neck and had the strongest neck in the world, but your hair getting caught in a zip line. I mean, there's just some things in life you can't prevent, but you can really reduce your odds of having some of these injuries by maintaining your mobility and keeping your strength up as you age.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. As we close, I want to talk about stretching because it's something we probably need to draw more attention to in the fast rate, or maybe not. I kind of want to hear what your perspective is. So, we do dynamic stretching at the beginning of our workouts, and then we do just a little bit of a cool down, but we like to get people in and out within 30 minutes. That's our commitment, that's part of our thing. Um, what is your perspective on stretching?
Yeah, I think I probably have a good background in this because I was a gymnast and a martial artist, and I spent decade of my life just doing static stretching, and I could do the splits across chairs and things at one point. So, but I do much less of it now, and I think that that's kind of where the research is pointing. Like when you're looking at keeping your system healthy, the strengthening exercises have way stronger evidence than stretching. Like I was saying before, most people have they have enough flexibility and mobility to complete life tasks.
Mhm.
So we don't worry too much about stretching unless the person needs to gain flexibility for a goal they have in life. Like if they need to have more flexible hamstrings to complete this particular activity, then yeah, obviously adding stretching for your hamstrings could be useful. Sometimes people like stretching from kind of a excuse me, like a mental health standpoint, like some kind of like yoga in a way, like
Yeah.
they feel like stretching is helpful in that way. There are some Sometimes there are certain pain conditions like sciatica where sometimes having some stretches like for the posterior chain, the hamstrings and the sciatic nerve can help them when they're getting out of pain. But really, most of the time now, when I'm recommending stretching, it is exactly what you said. It's dynamic stretching
Mhm.
before a workout. It's kind of a warm up. You're just taking your body through the movements it's going to need to do during the workout.
Mhm.
And then you really prioritize strength training. And then maybe at the end, like I'll find sometimes if people have done a really heavy legs day and then they have to go sit on a plane or in a car, they'll get back pain. But if we add some static stretching at the end, they're less likely to have back pain. So there's kind of specific instances where I'll add it in, but I do much less static stretching than I used to, when I was in martial arts and gymnastics. I mean, it made sense back then, right? Like I needed to be flexible for those sports. Nowadays, I don't need the same flexibility, so I do much less of it.
Ooh, you heard it here first, everybody, with Dr. Tom Walters. I feel like we are just on the right track then with what we do. Dynamic stretching, we go through the movements. If we're doing a leg day, we're going through the deadlifting motion and this and that. But then afterwards, we're cooling down. We're doing just a little bit, but not spending a lot of time. And it is a question that I receive. So, very cool. Thank you so much. Dr. Walters, where can we find and follow you online?
Yeah, I'm at Rehab Science on Instagram and YouTube. If people ever want to DM me on Instagram, I try to respond to those. So if they just mention they heard this here, or if they have a question, I'm happy to try and point them in the right direction. If they've got a pain or an injury, I can send posts or whatever. And then, of course, my Rehab Science book is on Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, all those places.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with my Fastaway audience. We appreciate it and we're better off for it.
Thanks for having me.
Bye, everyone.